Thank you for staying with us. Professor Yemi Oke joins us this morning to discuss energy, and he is a professor of energy and electricity law at the University of Lagos. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
University of Lagos, I mean, just a quick one. You heard Prof, his closing remarks, what's your take on his closing remarks about, 40 years of lamentation?
I guess the lamentation would definitely continue.
Really?
Yeah. I don't know whether some of us who endure for 40 years are well over 10 years in the system. There's nothing to celebrate. And Nigerians are aware that actually there's really nothing to celebrate in the academia. And we're talking about the future of the country. Well, maybe I should leave it at that.
Do you think the issues are even being raised to the right authorities to discuss them?
Okay, this is what I'm saying. I'm not speaking for ASU because I don't have the mandate of ASU to speak for ASU. But the challenge we are faced with is we have universities designed, programs designed for 50 students. Over time, that has grown to 350 students. The facilities have not been improved. It's deteriorating. For me, I teach law. I'm having challenges teaching my students. And we're saying I should continue. What that means is the standard is going to be lowered. It's going to get as bad as students after graduating will get to the law school and turn their law reports. Get to the law course and turn law reports upside down because. And you're going to face the same challenge or challenges in the medical school where nurses and doctors are not being properly trained. You're going to face the same thing in the engineering department where civil engineers are not able to construct or supervise skyscrapers and all these flyovers. You're going to get the same thing in the Department of Aeronautic Engineering where people are trained to fly planes and drones and the rest, and they can't. It's a scary situation. The picture is not really looking good at all. But then I don't think we're ready because our nation is not ready. But then, let's see. We're talking about the future of the country, really.
Well, let's just leave that there for now. But, sensitive. When you say that, it only brings to mind also the challenges in the energy sector. It would seem like or rather, would you say that, really, that, we have prepared we have installed capacities that are not able to take care of the needs that we really have? Is that the case, or we are just underutilizing what we have?
We don't have what it takes to get us to where we need to get to. And we're not even optimizing the little that we have. I recall, before privatization, which is the starting point, we had about 4,800 installed capacity. I was actually distributing well over 3,500. Privatization of the power sector is almost 10 years now, if not more. With the noise and hyped expectations, we're even generating less and we're distributing less. It's like during the time of Nitel, assuming we had 100,000 lines, then with the coming on board of MTN, Glo, Etisalat, and all of them, we're now having like 30,000 lines. You'll be worried. That's a picture. And we're not facing the fact. That's a picture. We talk of stranded capacity. We talk of capacities, power that is generated but not distributed because it's stocked somewhere. How does that benefit an average man on the street? How does that benefit Nigerian businesses and homes? How does that benefit small-scale enterprises, all those artisans who really need power to do that stuff?
You may want to explain that a little further, and I'm pretty sure maybe Mark or Chamberlain will want to raise that with you earlier, because we read it on the front page of the newspaper this morning. And previously, we've also received information that discos are rejecting load.
let me get to. I think I'm going to put Maokwe and Chamberlain on the spot. Thank God they're in Abuja. They've escaped my aggression this morning. We sat here almost 10 years ago when the whole thing just started. We're talking about what we needed to do. And I said, we got it wrong. And I said, Nigerian banks are going to be in trouble. And we sat here. The videos are there in your archives. I said about 5 Nigerian banks were going to go down the drain with their exposure to the power sector because money did not come in. I think we already had 4 banks went down. And I said the discos are not solvent and that the discos are not buoyant. As we speak, 90% of the discos are technically insolvent. And they are supposed to be getting powers to my homes and your home and in the industries. And it's scary. It's really, really depressing to me. I've written severally, I've spoken severally, we've shouted terms without number. And it's like we seem to be turning things upside down. Simple, commonsensical things that we ought to do as a nation. And I'm really wondering, I really need to see the political players now, the actors, talking more about power. We cannot grow as a nation if you don't fix that. That is the engine of development. That's the only thing that can speed up our development. I know what industries are closing down. No industry can survive on diesel. It's difficult to have your own captive generation. It's a lot more expensive. Everything is dollarized. We can't be talking of solarization. Solarization is at best you put some 1 or 2 points of bulbs in your home. That's not industrialization. That cannot power even an ordinary barber. How many of them will now be using, you can't even have petrol as we speak. This is out of the reach of an average Nigerian. Industries are closing up. Eateries, you know how many eateries have closed up? How can you sustain your restaurant, your eateries on diesel? They are closing down. I don't want to mention names. You know the eateries that we're used to, that where we buy meat pies and donut and fried rice and chicken. They're gone. What killed them? Power. It's not sustainable. And we're saying, okay, it beats my imagination. Before we started privatization, we had well over 4,000 megawatts. Nigeria wasn't this huge in terms of population. We never had this size in terms of industries. Now we're generating less.
But what do you think is responsible for that? Because, for instance, one of the presidential candidates is saying that he is going to remove the electricity or power, electricity generation in particular, from the exclusive list and put it in the...
No, if you have Chamberlain and Obama, we sat down here, we read the Constitution. It's never been in the exclusive list. One of the issues I had with them, we got it wrong. It's clear. If you have your Constitution, you can bring it, anybody can bring it. Read it. Electricity power is in the concurrent list, second schedule to the Nigerian 1999 Constitution as amended. It's never changed. We have item 13 of that Constitution, which talks about federal government, and when you talk about grid-based generation, national grid issues, setting up institutions, and NERC and the rest. Fine. Then immediately after item 13, we have item 14, which talks of off-grid. So off-grid simply means generation transmission not on the national grid. And it says states' houses of assembly will have power to make laws, not in respect of anything, in respect of 1, generation, 2, transmission, 3, distribution, all inclusive powers, all 3, in the houses of assembly to make laws. It also gives House of Assembly power to set up institutions like equivalent of NERC. And I sat here, I said, I expected LASEC, something like Lagos State Electricity Regulatory Commission, Ogun State Electricity Regulatory Commission, Kogi State Electricity Regulatory Commission, Kaduna State Electricity Regulatory Commission, Yola State Electricity Regulatory Commission, because states have constitutional powers to generate, transmit, and distribute off-grid. I got sad each time I realized states will have to clap their hands behind and beg federal government for licenses to generate within their states.
So what is there, in your opinion? What's the local standing law for them to be doing that? Because
states, it took me a long time, because even when Mr. Fashola was there, we were having, and of course, we expected so much when it got overwhelmed, and nobody agreed that state could generate. But somewhere along the line, they shifted their ground. They now realized, oh, this is a constitutional issue, state could generate. Where they got it wrong, federal government says they are in charge of rural electrification. Rural electrification cannot be a federated structure. It's even wrong to have federated grid arrangement in the 21st century. How can you expect development lumping Lagos, Abuja, Rivers on the same national grid? Those states are humongous, they're huge, and they should have their own separate grids. I even said in these studios that the best we could do is to have a regional grid. And if states are able to generate, transmit, and distribute at their own levels, states like Bayelsa may have excess in terms of generation capacity, and they said to other states. I even said these schools should be cross-lances. I said a whole lot of things, and we're not there yet. And I'm not seeing signs that we're about to take off and get there. The problem is huge. I'm not hearing clearly from the political actors how they're going to fix the power sector.
Is it because it is overwhelming, or because no one really has the answers?
I guess it's because of the depth of knowledge of how to operationalize the sector. Even fundamentally, I said 10 years ago, with my anchor, Chamberlain and Maokwe, I said the law that we are relying on is unconstitutional because federal government, the Constitution says concurrent, but the Electric Power Sector Reform Act is now administering the sector as a federated entity, as if it's a concurrent thing. And I said, even in the law, when it was passed, there were well over 250 to 300 errors in that law that we need to get on away with. The Electric Power Sector Reform Act was never intended to operationalize the power sector. It goes by its name, Electric Power Sector Reform Act. It was a reformative act. It was meant to midwife the privatization. But since 2005, the law that was meant to midwife privatization is now being wrongly, incompetently administered as a law to operationalize the power sector. Your guess is as good as mine. It's not going to work. The size of the engine, you now put it in a trailer. It's not going to. There are a lot of radical steps, radical reforms, radical policy issues we ought to have deployed. I'm not seeing signs that will make me comfortable that we are deploying it or about to deploy it, or there is knowledge-based engagement that will lead to effective deployment of this.
Prof, let's go back to something you said just a second ago. You said there are about 250-something errors in the law that we are using now for the privatization of the power sector.
Yeah.
Documented errors, and they have not been corrected.
Let me tell you what. No, I don't. You see,
I'm asking because, I mean, if we are using the law, an erroneous law, it begs the question then, of course, perhaps it is part of the reason that the contracts are faulty and the whole arrangement of the sector is as conflicting, so to speak, as it is.
This. When I wrote the first book, of course, by the way, the electricity law is a new field of law that I pioneered, really, because we had NEPA, HACS, PCL, those laws scattered, but there weren't really research effort to put them together and start to analyze until I started. And I branched it off from energy law. And I've done quite a bit of work on that extensively, written books and the rest. What we discovered, when I was doing my first book in 2009 to 10, I put the law, I put the constitution, I put the framework, global best practices, and I saw serious, worrisome errors. And I approached them, I said, this is not looking good. This is going to create problems. Even we discussed PCAF. You know, PCAF is Power Consumer Assistance Fund, which is meant to be a kind of intervention to mitigate increase in electricity tariffs. There's so many errors. So when I now said, okay, these are my views, just preliminarily. And they called me, this presidential something on energy, they called me. You know what they said? They said, yes. Then I was a doctor. They said, hey, doc, yes, fantastic, but now we just privatize. Can we now start to change the law? I've been recently privatized the electricity assets. Say, well, they needed to wait after privatization might have matured before they start to tinker with the law. I said, fine, I had no problems with that. We're all trying to make our country work passionately. One of the presidential candidates years back, when we were doing some research forecast, he said, well, you know, you young man, I only see you when you go to all those media houses talking of power. And it struck me when he said, well, I was in a law firm that started the Aaron thing. With the current vice president, a lot of work, overnight we were working. That was an experimental project that should have been allowed to work. If Aaron had worked, by now, almost all the states in the federation will have followed suit and they will have been self-sufficient in terms of electricity generation, transmission, and distribution. But for needless political reasons, Aaron was killed. The same thing, Lagos Metro was killed. For how long? But for how long are we going to continue toying with the future of this country when we could do the right thing?
Now, you said something I was trying not to ask you about Enron, but now that you have brought it up. If it was not against the Constitution for a state government to set up a system like Enron, is it a challenge of law that it was not challenged against the federal government at the time to ensure it worked?
Let me give you something that will probably make you sad. I'm aware, give it to Raji Fashola. He set up IPP in Ikeja here and in Lagos on the Highland Marina. Our office was in Marina. A lot of effort, a lot of work. And I think the one in Ikeja had about 18 megawatt capacity. Then, I think maybe slightly more, the entire Alausa Secretariat will not use more than 12 to 13 megawatts in the day. So, and the smart governor felt, okay, now we have this capacity, like 3 or 4 hydro megawatts in the day. In the night, the entire 18 or 20 megawatts is hydro. Can I start to deal with some industries around the Ikeja so that I can give them electricity? At least they will run over all through the night and we'll have some I mean, that will bring some money back to the purse of the Lagos state government. You know what happened? The DISCO went to court. They said Ikeja was their franchise. And I said, that's one of the issues. You franchise the whole of Ikeja and somebody had megawatts to distribute. You are saying it cannot distribute. Okay, you go ahead and distribute megawatts to them. You say you don't have. You know, it's annoying. Those are the kind of faulty things we did. And we still continue to do in the power sector. And nobody seems to be ready to change this thing. We need radical steps. Those who really love this country, I say, come, this is not going to work. Left to me. I said, I'm not going to undo the privatization because we told them not to do it when they did it. You know what I will do? Federal government has stakes in these entities. I will call them. Federal government will yank off its equity. Federal government should drop its equity to like 10. and give the 30% to serious-minded investors so that they will dilute the shares. The new investors will have controlling shares, and they take hold of the discos and the gencos, and they run it successfully. Money did not come in. When they were branding that they have the financial muscles, the technical muscles to run the power sector, we say these guys were just selling these assets as a means of political patronage. For the first time, President Buhari mentioned the same thing. He said, come, errors were made. So now they bought the entities. They were now borrowing money from Nigerian banks. They are going to sell electricity in Naira. When they bought those entities, Naira was 161 to $1. Now, dollar is 800. How much of a tariffs adjustment are you going to do to equate that? So it's difficult for them to even repay their loans. Yep. Loans that are dollarized loan. I need to generate your megawatts of billions in Naira. And you said the power sector will work. It's collapsing on all of us. And I just hope, honestly,
it seems you're raising more questions. I thought we were going to have. I don't know. Well, Markwe, you've called her out, so she's ready to take you on. Markwe, go ahead.
Indeed, I still remember a lot of the conversation which we had in Lagos. I mean, we've had these conversations over time, and we've also seen developments in the power sector, for good or for bad, over time as well. Indeed, as you rightly pointed out, power is on the concurrent list. You have been saying it, you know, like a broken record, that states do have some role to also provide power, that they are not hampered by the Constitution. And we've seen a number of states, you know, try to key into that. I think at that time, Ogun State was also trying to do something with regards to generation of electricity and also trying to distribute. We do not know how far they eventually went. But with this issue of monopoly, you know, the fact that a number of the distribution companies have their franchise areas, so to speak. I do know that when the former governor of Lagos State became Minister of Power, there was something he tried to do to break the monopoly of the distribution companies, which was that, you know, anyone who was generating at least 2 megawatts could distribute around a certain area. I do not know if you're privy to that particular innovation, and if you are, you know, how that worked in your own estimation.
Thank you, Marpe. You're actually talking about the eligible customer regime. Eligible customer regime was killed. Eligible customer regime was to allow manufacturing concerns, right, companies, to be able to buy or procure power directly from gencos. The policy was fantastic. They rolled out the policy. And then the discos again went to court. They got an injunction because, hey, you have Nestle around me, you have Guinness around me, you have these companies that are my major customers. By the time you ask them to buy directly from the gencos, I'm going to be in trouble because basically I'm surviving on them. They went to court. And I sensed, because I followed the debate, a lot of things happened behind the scene. And then there was a reversal of the policy saying, oh, no, the policy had some errors. It wasn't properly thought out. We are reversing it. And, you know, I have so much to say. I hope you're not getting me to talk about my inaugural lecture because it's coming. And I'm going to unleash a lot of things. Is an answer in search of a question, a partner's prognosis of the Nigerian electricity law. I'm going to say a lot about the power sector. If you need to get it right, the document will be there. But we're not getting it right. Similar to what Marpe asked, the eligible customer regime that was not allowed to fly. Of course, most of the manufacturers went the way of captive. They started developing their home mini-grid, and it's still not, the policy wasn't allowed to see the light of day. Similar to that was what was called CAPME. That's like a credit a scheme that allows consumers to pay for meters. And over time, the cost of meters will be defrayed from your billings. I love CapMe because a lot of Nigerians were getting meters. But now, they changed CapMe within 2 years to MAP, that is Meter Asset Provider Regulation. And they were trying to extricate metering from the GENCOs, sorry, from the DISCOs. And I'm telling you in the studios that the DISCOs are still almost directly in charge of metering. They still have their cronies selling meters under MAP. They will tell you, no, it's not only the DISCO that is doing it, it's one company that is doing it. You still pay. You pay huge amount of money, more than what we were paying when we had CapMe. CapMe, I think, was about 35,000 or thereabout, but now you pay as much as 150. I just bought 4, and I know what Nigerians pass through. You queue for days, and your businesses will be suffering. Your homes will. I mean, you know, we've had series of policy somersaults, which isn't good for the polity. And I'm optimistic that whoever gets there, in fact, before they even get there, Nigerians should scrutinize their power policy manifesto. What do you have to say about power, so that we don't continue closing businesses? Businesses will not continue dying in quick succession. So we need to know what they want to do about energy and power, and Nigerians should react to it appropriately.
Sounds a lot to me like you're asking each one of them to sit at a panel, and then you'll be asking them one after the other.
Honestly, Nigerians deserve to know.
Most certainly, because the issues are not just going to go away. It's not just going to go away.
It's affecting everybody.
But, you know, unfortunately, as you said, so much to say, so little time. We have to thank you very much for being here this morning. Hopefully, we'll be able to continue this conversation another time.
Thank you.
Professor Yemi Oke is a professor of energy and electricity law at the University of Lagos. Thanks again for your time this morning.